Hello and welcome, guys, to another episode of It's a Silly World podcast. With me, Utkarsh Sarswat. Joining me today is Sumikant Barik, and we have a special guest for the very first time, Brendon. Brendon, guys, is a public speaking expert, and since we received so many kind reviews from you lot that how we don't know how to talk and how bad we are at conversations and how disoriented I am at speaking, Brendan here will be guiding us how to talk. So, Brendan, how are you?
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. It's great to be on. I'm great. How about you two?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Somya?
I'm doing fine. Okay, so I just wanted to know about the coronavirus cases in your region, Brandon.
Absolutely. If I'm being honest, I actually don't know them because I don't care to listen to that. And let me explain why. If you focus too much on negative things and negative attributes, you're not really focusing on what you're supposed to be doing, which is making an impact. So I actually have no clue what the cases are. So no idea.
Okay, but are you in lockdown or are you allowed to move freely?
Oh, right. So it's kind of a mix. We're allowed to move around, but there's still physical distancing and there's still
Yeah, mask.
masks and things like that. So I honestly don't go outside that much. I actually stay at home 99% of the time. So that's the situation here. But you make the most out of it, right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I assume from that not much has changed for you, I guess.
Oh no, a lot of change. I was supposed to go to like
Okay.
5 countries this year, so definitely things changed for sure. It's just about how do you readapt, how do you reinvent yourself. So for me, for example, I speak at a lot of conferences and I also attend a lot of conferences. So for me, it was
Mhm.
just like, oh, traveling, taking a flight every week is just a normal thing. So when I got stuck at home, I kind of just said, what do I do now? How do I grow this YouTube channel? How do I make a difference in the world? How do I still make an impact? And then obviously, after you get over the kind of small depression for a couple of days, you start to just say, okay, what do I need to do here? And guesting on podcasts is one of those things. Doing virtual keynotes, creating more YouTube content, just thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest,
Yeah.
one thing that I've really noticed that there has been a lot of new YouTube channels and stuff like that. Like the online content in these past few months has increased quite a lot. Like for everything from for the very basic stuffs, you have a tutorial now at YouTube, which wasn't the case before. Like people have been very open to share their talents and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
man, the tutorials on YouTube's are great, man. Like you can learn anything from YouTube now.
I agree. And that's why I started MasterTalk, right, the YouTube channel, because I realized that even if we can learn a lot of things on YouTube, with public speaking, the content was really horrible.
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, for me, it's been a while. Like for past 3 years, I think I have had my friends tell me that I'm not as good of a public speaker that I probably can be. Like actually tend to stutter a lot because to me, like my mind works at a pace that is much faster than I speak. So it's like in my mind, I'm already three sentences ahead of what I'm speaking.
Right.
So I am the exact opposite of him. I tend to speak slowly, and I am a nervous guy. That public speaking is not my thing right now, but I want to improve. So I hope you can guide me to some extent.
Of course, and look, I think the journey for both of you, even if you're completely opposite, is the same thing, right? Which is the following question: where does our fear of public speaking come from? If you think about it, I've spoken in stages in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US, podcasts everywhere, and for some reason, we all share that same fear, but we don't understand where it comes from. So let's break that down so we can all get a clear understanding here. So the
Mhm.
question we need to ask ourselves is, where have we given most of our presentations? Because that's where the answer is, right? Wherever you give most of our presentation, that's where you learned how to speak. And the answer
Yeah.
for most of us is school. We don't wake up one morning and say, hey, Utkarsh or Sumya, you want to get breakfast today and present all day? Nobody does that. It's not fun, right? We're in school and three things happen. we present subjects we're not passionate about, and we never get to pick it. 2, the students we're presenting to don't care. Not because they don't care about us, because they love us, but they're worried
Yeah.
about their own presentation. They got to present in 10 minutes. They're thinking about what they have to do. And
I mean, to be
3,
honest,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you there.
No, go
I
ahead.
had friends that were more than happy to interrupt me while I was speaking, which caused even more nervousness. Like, obviously, when you go up to speak in the class or go up to present, you have two type of people. One that are very much concerned about their own presentation and don't really give a shit about what you're trying to speak. And then there are some other people who I am apparently friends with who try their best to ruin your presentation just for the fun of it.
Oh, and man, I have like friends where like the public speaking was not cool. You know, like not speaking in public was cool in my school. So like we never tried to speak in public so that we'll be cool.
Oh wow.
That's hilarious.
That's the bizarre thing, right? Now that I think about it, I think that's where I got that nervousness to speak in public.
Right, exactly, right? So just to build that analogy further, and then you have teachers who are really smart, really well educated, but don't have time to coach you. They're too stressed. They got 40 presentations to go through in 2 classes. They can't sit you down and say, "Hey, Utkars, Sumya, let's spend 10 minutes and go through your presentation." Nobody has time for that. So when you're always presenting topics you don't like to students who don't care, to teachers who are too stressed, this happens in every subject. History, math, sciences, English, French, languages, Hindi, whatever you're learning, you're taught to believe that public speaking is a chore. Public speaking is like doing your laundry. Public speaking is like getting a parking ticket for something that you did wrong. Public speaking is a responsibility. It's an obligation. If I'm at school, it's tied to a grade. And if I'm at work, it's tied to a result. We don't do
Yeah.
it for fun.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah. I
why
completely agree.
that's why we suck, essentially.
Yeah, I mean that's actually very fair because I remember during my like 8th grade or 9th grade, I was like the uh, like completely opposite to Somya. I have actually been very enthusiastic about speaking in public usually, and that was the same case back since I was in 7th grade. And during those times, we used to get assignments like you have to write a speech or group discussions or stuff like that. And out of the 4 or 5 friends that I was very close with, I used to write all of their speeches, regardless of what their topic was or what my topic was. Like we used to have deals like somebody else will do my project work for say economics or history, and in return I will write their speech for whatever assignment that we have been doing. So yeah, it definitely felt at times that people weren't as enthusiastic, and a lot of people half-assed their speeches, and teachers weren't really always interested. And yeah, I completely agree. Teachers don't tend to give that much time and that much importance actually to public speaking, which I really thought was kind of crazy because see, like right now we are having our own podcast, and so we are having to speak a lot. But in general, I mean, I did kind of actually realize a lot of my faults in speaking when I started this podcast, because earlier I used to be very ignorant about my own faults, and which is very crazy to me because we are having to talk about hundreds of people on a daily basis, and the way you speak can really be your first impression and maybe even last first in some cases.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And once we shift the mindset from it being a chore to making a difference, to share an idea, to make an impact in the world, it's a lot easier to practice it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like Brendon, I wanted to ask a question. So like, does language matters in public speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Like which language do you speak? Like if you speak your mother tongue, then and if you speak a foreign language, does that make any difference in public speaking?
Of course, and let's go through that because I know a lot of us struggle with presenting English as a second language. So I think it's going to be useful to go through this. So just so for everyone listening, I speak three languages. So I speak English, French, and I also speak Tamil because my parents are from Sri Lanka. And I can
Wow.
keynote, so I can present in English and French. I have trouble presenting in Tamil, but I can have conversations in the language. But the challenge is simple, right? How do you present in a language that's not your mother tongue? And that's basically the question. So the way that I see it is it's a lot easier to present in your first language than it is to the others. And the reason is because you understand the cultural context of every word that you're saying, not just the words, the vocabulary, but how you say it in a way that makes sense to people. But when you transition languages, it's like transitioning cultures. You're not familiar with it anymore. You don't talk with that language every day, and it becomes much challenging or more challenging for you to figure it out. So what is the strategy? The strategy is simple. If, for example, let's say your first language is Hindi, your second language is English, and you want to give a presentation in English, my advice, if you're getting started, is to write your speech in Hindi. So write it in your first language first. So that way, your words are perfect. They come out perfectly. You know exactly what you're saying because that's your language. And then after, what you want to do is you want to translate that speech in English. And then after you translate it in English, the language you want to speak it in, then the next thing to do is to get a group of native speakers. So get a group of people who speak English as their first language to give you feedback. So that way you can change a lot of the grammar mistakes you're making or the punctuation mistakes you're making. So when you actually give the presentation, it's going to be amazing.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Does
That's
that
great.
does that make sense? Anything
yeah,
else?
it definitely makes
Yeah,
sense
yeah.
quite a lot.
Makes sense.
I actually had two questions for you on
Like,
that. Um, so my first
yeah, go
question
ahead.
was, as you said, you speak three languages. Like you are comfortable in three languages, and to me that I relate to it quite a lot because I actually speak three languages, which like there are various levels to it. Like I can speak English, Hindi, and Bengali, and I'm very uncomfortable at Bengali, so I don't try to speak a lot. And then there's Hindi, which is my mother tongue, and like weirdly enough, I actually speak a lot in English. Like I think in English because of how much I've been exposed to the language. So I wanted to know, how is it about you? Like since you speak three languages, when you think about something in your brain, does it like which language is that?
Yeah, for me personally, it's English because the difference between me and you two is even if I have Sri Lankan roots, I was born in Canada, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I don't have an accent. But at the same time, as you practice other languages and you learn how to pronounce those words, if you put a lot of work into it, like I've had over the years, then you're able to speak multiple languages without having an accent. So it's just something you work on. But I would say for me, thinking is always English.
Okay. Uh,
So, like, what happens? We consume a lot of English in our day-to-day life. Like, we watch series and movies in English. Like, we text in English. We like read in English, but the conversation are not that much in English because like we speak in our native languages.
Correct.
So that's why like the mm, disparity comes when we speak English or we present English to somebody, uh, to a public platform, in a public platform. That happens.
Absolutely. And you're right. You're right, Simeon. Like that's the issue is that if we're not conversing enough in the language, if we're not speaking enough in it, if we're not presenting enough in it, it's going to be much harder for us to speak in that language without having an accent.
hmm.
Yeah.
Basically, coming to the accent part of the question. So, as you said, you don't have an accent because basically you have been living in Canada since your childhood, I assume, and so you have been exposed to English as your first language in a sense. And the thing with me is, so I take I take in a lot of content during my day. Like I spend almost 3 to 4 hours on any given day on YouTube. And what happens with me is I start talking in an accent, like not completely in that accent, but my accent changes depending on what content I'm actually watching. Like right now, I wasn't watching any content, so my accent is very weird right now. If I was watching say someone from UK, my vocabulary, my accent changes very weirdly. Does that happen to you as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think the way that I see it is the best way to learn how to speak properly and to pronunciate is to actually do karaoke. I know this is really weird, but one fun fact about me is I speak three languages, but I can actually karaoke in eight. So when I change languages, like I'll just use an example really quickly. Quand je parle français, like when I change to French, notice how the accent isn't there. When I speak in Korean, 음나세요, which is hi in Korean, there's no accent. Or if I choose Japanese, to use an extreme example, konnichiwa genki desu ka? Notice how in all of these languages, as I'm changing over and over again, there's no accent. Why is that? The reason is because I learned to sing their songs, even if I don't understand how to the words or know how to sing them. What happens is you learn to pronounce words that you don't really understand. So when you go back to words you do understand in languages you know how to speak, it's much easier for you to pronounce those words.
Yeah,
That's a great
that actually really makes a lot of sense for
something.
me because
Yeah.
like most of my English speaking comes from me listening to songs and singing them quite a lot. So yeah, that
Also, like you spoke in Japanese. I watch a lot of
Me too.
animes, so I can like yeah.
so now Brandon, I wanted to inform you like so the last podcast that we put out, me and Somya together, I had these three comments that I really liked, and people were very kind enough to actually say these comments to me in my DMs. So the first comment is from Magmix98. He said, "You both are horrible speakers. You need to work on how loud you are, and Somya really needs to work on how pathetically slow he is." I wanted to know how that happens. Like I do, and I think one reason for me being very loud is because of me. Like I stuttered through my sentences. I don't really figure out the words as quickly as I should be. So how do you come over that?
Yeah, I think the idea is, you don't want to get too negative with the feedback too, or else you just don't get better. But I think the idea
Yeah.
is you need honest friends who just give you the truth. So I'll give an example. When I started speaking, I used to be really, really aggressive. Like I wouldn't ask you for your attention, I would demand it. Notice how that changed. But a
Okay.
lot of my friends came up to me and they just said, "You just sound like," they start swearing at me. They're like, "You need to tone it down." So that's how now with my voice now I have a beautiful radio voice that sounds like honey, right? But I didn't sound like that at the beginning, right? It took time. So I think for you two, what you want to do is you want to give feedback to each other. So whenever Utkarsh is too loud, you have to say, "Hey, Sumia has to go. You're too loud. Like tone it down." And vice versa. If Sumia is too slow or doesn't speak in the right way, then you want to change that as well. And one great way of doing this is to emulate other speakers. So let's say you watch some of my videos
Yeah.
and you try and speak like me, slowly, and you literally say my stuff word for word. Hi, my name is Brendon. This is blah
Okay.
blah blah.
See, I actually tried that. Earlier you linked one of your videos to me, and I watched that video and I tried to basically speak just as you were. Like I tried to copy your cadence, and that seemed so exhausting to me because to
Exactly.
me,
That's the
yeah,
point.
yeah. To me, it feels like it felt like I was speaking really slow, and that I to me it just felt very exhausting.
Exactly. So here's the difference between our two approaches, Utkarsh. So here's my point of view on this, especially for podcast hosts. If you're not willing to listen to yourself speak, you can't expect anyone else to listen to you. So the way that I
Yeah.
see it is, even from your perspective, I seem really slow, but that's
Hmm.
because you speak really fast. So let's say you watch your own recordings and you're noticing yourself like speaking really, really quickly. Let's say, for example, this is what I do. When I
Okay.
give a presentation, I practice. I don't just practice presenting, I look how everyone else is reacting to me. If 90% of the people are like scared and like this guy's way too aggressive, it means I'm speaking in the wrong way. So basically what I'm saying is your own perspective of how you speak is not relevant, right?
Hmm.
Let me repeat that again for everyone. your own perspective on how you think you speak does not matter. It's not relevant because you're not speaking to yourself. You're speaking to other people. So, for example, in the way that I'm speaking, I rarely get feedback now because the feedback's already been given to me over the last couple of years. So I was able to change the way that I spoke. So now, when people listen to me in a podcast, they go, "Oh, Brenda, you have a really nice voice." Or I don't get the negative feedback I used to get. But when I started, it was like, dude, like we can't understand what you're saying. Right? So what you want to do, Karsh, is you want to expand the feedback circle that you're getting. So for example, even to this day, as a professional speaker that I am today, I still get feedback from 25 different people. And if 15 of them or 20 of them say that I speak a certain way and it's wrong, it's probably wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go with the majority.
Yeah, but you have to put in the work, essentially.
Yeah.
If I start to speak a little fast, starting from today, I'll feel like I will feel that I am speaking differently from what I was speaking before. But like with time, I will be used to that speed. So that.
Yeah, see, this is going to be cut out, right?
So, like, one example of something you can think about is you should just write a speech, like a 60-second elevator pitch. That's a great practice. And just keep doing it over and over and over again. Like, just so people understand, like, this is not an overnight process. Like, the keynote I give now, I've done over 300 times. This podcast, this is probably my 150th podcast. Like, it's not something that you get overnight. Over time, as you practice and practice and practice, after a couple of years, you just become really good at what you do.
One other question that I had for you was, so you might have noticed in the past 30 minutes that we have been talking, Somyo and I tend to stutter a lot through our sentences. Part of it is because English is not our first language and we are not aware of the word that we want to say.
For me, I struggle to know which word I will use. Use in a sentence.
And what
happens.
that leads to is we start stuttering and we use words like and stuff like that. And
then
our
tongue comes in between.
Yeah. And we have to edit quite a lot of this whole podcast down. So we edit out our stuttering and stuff like that. And my dad was actually listening to the part that I cut out, and he was saying to me that you use word like a lot. Like, see, there it is. As soon as I start a sentence, I use the word like to begin it. So I want to
the filler sentences.
So I wanted to know, how do you reduce that? How do you reduce the filler words and make the sentence more comprehensible and make the sentence
more crisp, more
more appealing,
more.
For sure. So here's the strategy that I would go with. I think it's always easier to master public speaking in your first language. So I would go back to Hindi and be the best speaker that you can be, and then transition to English with the confidence that you didn't have before. So for me, I didn't start my life keynoting in French, right? Keynoting is really difficult. You're speaking to a couple hundred people, and doing that in your second language isn't the easiest thing in the world. But since my first language is English, right? Tamil's my third language, right? So when I started English, I was like, okay, let me keynote really well in English, boosted up my confidence, and then I switched to French and I said a lot less filler words. So I think the key, so there's a couple of keys, but the first one is you want to get really, really good in Hindi first, which won't take you that long. And then with that newfound confidence, you're going to say, I can present in any language. English is going to be easy. And that mindset shift is really important. The second component is, how do you replace filler words? The way that you do this is by learning how to pause effectively in the way that I'm demonstrating right now on this podcast. So here's the exercise for you two. What you should do together, if you're two in the same room or something, is you two should do what I call long pauses and stares. So what I do with my clients and the people I work with is, let's say Sumya is one of my clients and he's giving a presentation. I force him to pause for 30, 40 seconds and just look at me in the eyes. It's super uncomfortable. Most people can't do it. And it's really, and here's the secret, right? The best speakers in the world can do that forever. In my workshops, I literally pause for 5 minutes. I look at everybody individually for 10, 20 seconds just to prove the point. The best speakers in the world can pause forever and ever
Yeah,
and ever.
actually, I have actually noticed that. I would take the example of a of an MLA. Was he an MLA? Okay, whatever. Basically, there was a politician back in 2002 who used to speak really slow. Like, I would say at this point, he was very famous for being slow. And what he used to do was he used to speak a word and then take about a 10-second gap just to get to the next word while he was speaking in his first language. And to me, that already, like, that did kind of annoy me at that time, but now when I look back at his addresses and his speeches, it really appeals to me that how he can actually stop for that long and still keep the interest of the person that he is talking to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man, like our now Prime Minister also speaks very slowly, but he is considered a great public
He's
speaker.
considered a great orator.
Yeah. Modi's good at what he does, but I think the idea is it's simple, right? The speakers and really good speakers are highly subjective. One speaker that I think is really good, you might not like. One speaker you think is really good, I might not like. I think the
Yeah.
key is you want to be consistent. So, in my opinion, one step of that consistency is learning how to pause for really long periods of time so that when you go back into your actual presentation, you can pause to however you see fit and to replace all of your ums and ahs with those silences. But that's an easy exercise that people can do. It just most people don't do it because it's very scary, especially with the Indian community, because they're not used to looking at people in the eyes for very long periods of time. So, for example, when I
Oh,
coach
for sure,
Indian,
for sure.
like I'll give an example, something super easy. When I coach a lot of Indian executives to stare at their wife's eyes for 2 minutes, they just can't do it, right? They just can't. They start to
Man,
panic. They go, "I'm not going to do that," and I go, "Exactly. That's why you're going to stink at public speaking because you're not willing to get into the discomfort, right?" So,
one reason for that is arranged marriages.
sorry.
One reason for that is marriages. You don't. I mean, I think you will not get it. But arranged marriages is a common thing in
Oh no,
India.
I get it. No, a lot of my cousins had those, but I think the key is the following. Like, if you can't stare into people's eyes without making it look awkward, this is something you can force yourself to learn, right? This is something I was super awkward as a kid. I learned it too. But once you learn it, it gives you this new confidence, this new power that you never had before. Then you feel you can present anything to anyone.
Hmm.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to know something. Like nowadays, there are two types of public speaking, right? One is the live public speaking, and another is the virtual public speaking, like live streaming on YouTube. That's a type of public speaking, right?
Yeah, it's very yeah. Go ahead.
Or if yeah, or you don't consider that public
No,
speaking.
it's all public speaking. For me, public speaking is everything. The conversations we have with our partners, the coffees we have with our friends, the presentations that we give, the live streams that we're on, and the podcast that we guest on. It's all public speaking. It's just different forms of it. So the way that I see it is
Yeah.
in person is very different from online. So let's say in person, when you give an in-person presentation, you can see how you're reacting. So now in this episode of the podcast, I can't tell whether you're laughing at my jokes. I can't tell if my advice is valuable or not. I can't tell if you're smiling or sad. I kind of have to assume, and that's the difference. You have to assume that everyone likes your content.
Yeah.
And that's what makes online presentations a lot more challenging. But at the same time, it's a great opportunity because if you can present really well online, when you go back to your in person presentations, you're just going to present that much better. So the takeaway is you want to focus on one area of communication and master that first and then go to the other areas. So for me, I started with presentation skills only, got really good at presentation skills, then I focused on conversation, then I focused on how do I be a good podcasting guest, how do I focus on giving virtual presentations, and over time I became really good at all areas of communication.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay.
That was actually really good. So, next thing that I really wanted to talk about was stage fright and the anxiousness of public speaking. Like, I used to be a dancer when I was like 15 years old or something like that.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, so basically I used to dance, and I even did quite a lot of big stages. And during those times I never had the stage fright. Like, I was very keen to dance actually. And even now, whenever I'm given an opportunity to perform, I don't have that kind of stage fright. However, since the last like 3 years, I have been hosting the freshers parties or the farewell parties at my college. And during those I really feel that anxiousness and the stage fright, like, which is very weird to me because I have been on the stages in front of a bigger audience, and during those times I never used to feel that stage fright. But now when I get on stage in front of like the 1,000 people that my college barely has, I feel the stage fright when I'm not even actually performing. I'm basically calling out names or talking about stuff.
MC.
So why is that,
Absolutely.
and how do you counter that?
Right. So, like I was alluding to earlier in the episode, the reason why we're scared of public speaking is because we perceive it in the wrong way. So, since most of our presentations were in school and we were taught to believe that public speaking is a chore, not a way to make a difference, we always get scared of public speaking whenever we think about it. So, the way that we fix this is by figuring out and learning that the fear of public speaking is not our fault, but rather the fault of the institution that we grew up in and grew with. So how do we fix that now? Now that we understand that's where the fear comes from. The way that you do this is by presenting the same presentation 100 times. When most people do public speaking, it sounds something like this. It's Wednesday, you have a presentation for Friday, you don't talk to your family for 2 days, you get the presentation ready, you present it, and then you throw it in the garbage and move on to the next one. Whereas the best speakers in the world, the Gary Vaynerchuks, the Tony Robbins, the Mel Robbins, anybody you can think of, they all do the same thing, which is they present the same presentation hundreds of times. Gary Vee is a good example here. He has been giving the same keynote for the past 12 years. He gets up on stage, he gets paid $125,000, and he says the following. Hey guys, grew up in the Soviet Union, came to the US. You guys got any questions? Like, that's it. It's always the same thing. And he does a phenomenal job. Most
Yeah.
people need to present one thing. If you present 10 things, you're going to suck.
Hmm.
So
like
think about
So,
you
like,
two, right,
okay,
as
go ahead.
podcast guests, right? Like you
Hmm.
two, this is probably episode 3 or 5 or 7. But after you do 200, you know how to podcast. Like, you know how to be a host. You know how to have
Yeah.
better conversation. Or if I use the extreme example, Joe Rogan is at episode 1300 now. So when you get to
Hmm.
that level and you do it so many times, you
yeah.
get really, really good at it. I'm also a great example of this. And if you don't believe me, go watch my first YouTube video. It's still up there. I used to sound like this. So hi guys, my name's Brendon, and
Okay, yeah,
today,
yeah, yeah.
and now I'm a lot
This,
better.
yeah, I did actually see a couple of first videos of yours, and like even on the Master Talk channel, and there's a huge difference of how you talk now and how you were in those videos. Like, a couple of them don't have actually that much of a difference, but there is definitely some difference. And I have noticed that same difference actually on this podcast as well. Like, in the past 30 or 40 minutes that we have been talking, you have actually changed like 4 different cadences, and you actually answer my each question very differently, if I'm not wrong.
That's correct. You got it. And the reason I'm so comfortable in this medium, just so you all know and understand this is my 150th podcast. Like, I've been on 20 podcasts just this week, right? So when I started getting on podcast, I was afraid. I was like, I wonder what Karsh is going to ask me. I wonder what Sumya is going to ask me. But when it's the 150th episode, guys, like, at some point, there isn't a question I don't know the answer
Yeah.
to. Everyone's going to ask me the same thing. Brendon, how do you transition from online presentation? Well, I've been asked that 25 times. Like, I know how to answer it now. But the first time
Hmm.
I wasn't sure. So that's the thing. It comes over time.
Okay.
With practice, it becomes like natural. It comes to your mouth naturally.
Right. You just need to be willing to do it. Like, just so people understand. Like, I started MasterTalk in January 2019, and it's been 18 months, right? So I have like 80 videos up. But what people don't know is I hated editing videos. So I one-taked all my videos. So every time I was 5 minutes into a 10-minute video and I screwed up, I would start all the way from the beginning. What does that mean? It
Oh,
means in a
wow.
year, I presented on camera
Man,
over 800 times. I presented on in front of a YouTube like camera 500 times, and I presented on my IG story every day. Even to this day, I still present on Instagram every day. I do like a little 30-second clip. So I'm not special, people. I'm not more important. I'm not more like talented. I just practiced a lot more than most people. That's why I can speak like
yeah,
somebody who has a million subs, even if I don't have close to a million subs.
Yeah, I mean,
you worked on it. You put your works. You worked hard to speak, like to present something, and that hard work at
yeah, it
uh,
really shows.
now it shows.
Absolutely. And I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Yeah. So one more question that I've
Also,
had
like,
from your answer. Sorry, Somya. Go ahead.
yeah, you first ask the question, then
Okay.
I will
So
go.
yeah, one question that I had from this answer that you gave was, so you said you used to take your YouTube videos, like you used to one take your whole video.
Correct.
Was there a particular reason behind that, or you just did that so that you can actually practice?
No, I did that because I didn't want to edit a single one of my videos. Like, I'm very different than most YouTubers in the sense that I hate making the videos. Like, I don't like the filming process. I don't like cameras. I don't like that process. What I like doing is I like making an impact and I like making great content for people to enjoy. So like you
Hmm.
two live in like thousands of miles away, but I think the beauty of video is you don't need me anymore. You can just watch, the videos and learn from me anyways. And I think
Yeah.
that's the magic. But since I didn't want to edit my videos, I just said, well, I got to do it in one shot because I don't even want to take time to frame this. Like, I don't want to, like, I literally, what I used to do is I would make the video, post it. That's it. Make the video, post it. No editing, nothing. But I just did that every week for a year, got really good on camera, and then I got my best friend to do all my production.
I mean, that's certainly very interesting because I was thinking about this as you said this. I actually don't I don't like editing this as well. Like, it takes me about 5 hours to edit down this podcast, and I hate every second of that at times. Like, at times I literally just given up on editing because it just sounded horrible and there was so much to do.
I'm with you, and that's the process, right? Everything has a price, right? If you want to be a great speaker, you got to present hundreds of times. If you want to be a great baker, you got to know how to every ingredient you need to understand. The same thing is with this, right? Like, I didn't want to edit my videos, but I was willing to pay someone else to do it, right? So
Hmm.
it's all about understanding what you're willing to do and what you're willing to give up for the dream that you have. Like, for me, I want to share this knowledge with people who can't afford me. It's just something that's really important to me. Because as someone who coaches, CEOs now, I make good money. I don't need more money. I think for me, it's more about how do I make an impact now? How do I create videos for people who can't afford my services, which is most people? And that's why I started the video. So whenever I want to give up, whenever I don't want to do it, I'm always reminded of the people who can benefit, like you two, right? And
Yeah.
you two can benefit from my content now and be fans and learn and without paying me anything, and that's really important to me. That's why I spend a lot of money on my YouTube channel.
Hmm.
That's the thing about passion, right? If you just don't do it just for money, you do it for you do it just because you want to make an impact, and just like you want to make a difference to many people in other countries, in all over the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we approach the end of this podcast, are there any specific tricks or tips that you want to share to make people better speakers and maybe to make their conversations more comprehensible and to make the conversations more meaningful in a sense? Like, it is filled with much lesser filler words. It is much more appealing to the people, to the person they are talking to.
Yeah, for sure. I think my advice would be there's a couple of things, but I think the first one is great conversations always stem from great people. So if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody who's just boring and you're interesting, well then you're not going to have a great conversation. The ums and ahs won't matter because you won't want to make that conversation happen. Whereas for me and my best friends always gather for like a 6-hour dinner, and we basically get into a yelling contest with each other and who's right. And it's the best part of my week. I love it, right? Because I
Yeah.
love conversing with people. And it's because I'm just talking to smart people all the time. that A, I learned something new, but B, I'm learning to have conversations a lot more than most people. So I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is this idea that I think isn't related to public speaking, but does in many ways, which is a quote I've always lived by, which is the following: be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, right? You want to do what everyone else, get the engineering job at IBM that everyone else wants, then go for that. Do that. But if you want to do something different, if you're listening to this podcast, you want to make a difference, then you need to realize that the only way to do that is to do different things, to make different decisions than everyone else is going to make. Don't you all find it odd that I started a YouTube channel at the age of 22, not on comedy, not on pranking, not on vlogs, but on public speaking and communication tips? Isn't
Yeah,
that bizarre? Right? That's the key.
yeah. That was actually one of the things that I was going to ask you. That when did you actually realize? I mean, with dancing or singing, it's always like you figure out. People tell you that you have this talent, but to me, at least in the society that I'm living, public speaking isn't normally considered as an art form or as a talent, and people don't usually tell you when you are actually speaking good or bad. Like, as I said, I have been speaking very horribly for a longest time. I'm 21, and I so probably have been speaking for 18 years very horribly, and nobody really corrected me until and unless like I was actually getting beyond the limit of their tolerance. So how do you actually realize that, okay, I want to do this, I'm actually good at this, and how did that come about? How your YouTube channel started?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was in university, kind of like the opposite of what you said, I grew up in an environment where, I was around really, really good speakers because I used to do these things called case competition. So think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were like watching cricket or like college football or playing
Hmm.
cricket or sports, I never cared about sports. What I was cared about was presentations. So I used to do presentations competitively. So just to give you all an idea, in 3 years, I presented 500 times and I coached dozens of people.
Holy
Yeah, it
Wow.
was nuts, right? And the reason I presented so much is it's like going to the Olympics but for business. So we would go up against universities around the world, and the best presenters would win. I'll give you an example that's related to India, well, close to India. So the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh is one of
Yeah.
those competing schools. So they flew out to Montreal, Canada. They took a 20-hour flight, paid $10,000 US to compete in this competition. Their
Hmm.
school funded everything just to give PowerPoint slides, right? So just to give you an idea,
Hmm.
that's like 1 million rupees, right? Like,
Yeah.
That, yeah, that's
that's
great.
crazy, right? So, but that was the world I was a part of, and the reason we competed is because the top jobs out of university in business school. So think about we're getting a job at McKinsey or IBM or a lot of these big companies like Deloitte. A lot of these big corporate companies would sponsor these competitions to hire the top talents. When I was 2021, I was presenting to senior level executives. So I learned how to speak really, really fast. And that's how I became the youngest speech coach in the world. Because by the time I had graduated at 22, I was already coaching CEOs of companies by the time I was 23. Because I just knew more about public speaking than everyone else. Because I just practiced it so much.
Yeah, I mean, you really presented quite a lot by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I was obsessive. Even to this day, I present like 20, 25 times a week. And I'm not exaggerating those numbers. Those are actually the number of times I still present. But I'm including podcasts. Let's say I do
Yeah,
20
yeah.
podcasts, 5 keynotes. I'm still presenting a lot to this day.
I mean, that's actually quite a lot. Like, I said to Soma at the end of every podcast that I feel kind of feel like I have done a workout after every episode because I'm just that much exhausted after talking for that long time. And so to think that you are actually doing that 20 to 25 times a week is kind of crazy to me, actually.
And that's how you become world class, right? So I'll give
I
you an
mean,
example. So like the
yeah.
homework for you two, in my opinion, is every day you go on your Instagram accounts, you open your phone on IG story, and you just say, "Hey guys, Utkarsh here. Here's the one lesson I learned from speaking with Brendon. Hope you like it." Then tomorrow you do the same thing. "Hey guys, Utkarsh here. This is the lesson I got from John's podcast." Monday, over
Hmm.
and over and over. Sumia, you too, say over and over again, and do it every day. I still
Hmm.
do that every day.
So we'll try it.
Okay, that's actually a brilliant advice. So with that aside, anything else that you wanted to promote, your YouTube channel, or anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go with my final life advice. So
Okay.
this idea of being insane or being the same, right? So it's odd that I started a YouTube channel at 22. It's odd, it's weird that I became a CEO or a coach at 23. All of these decisions I've made in my life are very different versus the decisions that everyone else makes. Oh, Utkarsh, you should go to school, get an education, become a doctor, an engineer, an accountant, or a loser. You get to pick, right?
Yeah.
And then get an arranged marriage with somebody you don't know and pretend to be happy, right? That's the rules. That's the rules
Yeah.
of our game in our
That's the
community.
standard.
And the only way to win, in my opinion, the only way to do something important with your life is to break all of those rules. When I was 16, I told my mother I was never going to do that. I think that was crazy. When I was 15, I told her religion didn't make any sense. When I was 16, I just made all these different decisions. And I'm not saying my decisions are correct, right? Because I have nothing
Hmm.
against religious
Yeah.
people. But what I will say is the following: the only way to find your own truth is to question everything. Why do you need to get married? Why do you need to do this? And you'll realize most of these assumptions are wrong, right? And I think an exercise for people to do is to write your own funeral speech. If you write your own funeral speech, it's very intense, it's morbid, but it helps you figure out who you want to be. And for those who want to reach out to me, you can message me on Instagram at MasterYourTalk. If you have any questions, concerns, complaints, insults, I'm happy to take anything. Don't be shy. I answer everybody. And if you want to check out my YouTube channel, that's MasterTalk in one word, where I share all of my public speaking information for free over there.
Yeah. So Brennan's Instagram account as well as the YouTube channel will be linked into the description. You can go and check out over there and improve your public speaking as well. And hopefully, the next podcast that me and Somya do, we actually learn something from this and give you a better presentation in terms of the podcast. Okay, Brendan, that was,
Yeah. Thank you,
yeah,
Brandon.
that was
Yeah.
lovely
Thank you,
talking
Brandon,
to
for
you, and I
yeah.
really do feel that I
I learned
learned
it.
quite a lot.
Yeah. Me too, man.
Absolutely, guys. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for being such a lovely guest, and hopefully we can even have you some other time if you're facing any difficulties or if we face any questions regarding this whole issue. And thank you for being a guest.
Of course, my pleasure.
With that, we'll end this podcast
Thank you.
and hopefully see you very soon with another episode of the Silly World podcast. Catch us live wherever you are listening to this podcast. We are on Spotify, Google, YouTube, everywhere. And don't forget to follow and subscribe and give a like, share this around, and share this to people who you think can benefit from what Brendan has taught us today. And give us your feedback. Of course, I'm looking forward to it. My DMs are always open for your abuses. Okay, peace out.